grand compte. Mais dès qu'on la rencontre, on se dit oulala, tiens la voilà. Salut, je ne t'ai pas apporté de fleurs, ça ne m'étonne pas, mais me voilà avec mon cœur, ça ne m'étonne pas, et aussi avec mon...
You're going to watch this and you're going to expect a film review, and what you're going to get is a small discussion on the film and then a whole bunch of discussions on life. Like this film is not neat. My name is Mad Cat Melody and I apologize. Okay, welcome back to another episode of Cinema Dream with me, Kip, and
Mad Cat Melody.
I'm tired as hell, a little bit under the weather, but here we go. Mad Cat.
Okay, so Bad Luck Banging or Looney Porn is a new movie about the evils of judging others and sexism and the hypocrisy of some about morality and what we choose to force onto other people. It takes on a lot, and it does it in a very weird way because it starts out, first of all, I didn't expect this, maybe I should have, considering the wacky, off-kilter going rogue type title. It starts off with a 3 or 4 minute just straight pornography.
3 or 4 minutes. I think you need to go ahead and rewatch that for research purposes. It's a lot longer than 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay, well,
Go on.
it starts off with porn is what I wanted to say, because anybody going into watching this, they should
Watch it with adults.
Because I wouldn't want to, for instance, watch it with my mother-in-law, right?
Yeah, that's usually your go-to person.
But because I have seen a lot of movies with my mother-in-law that maybe I shouldn't have, but maybe I should have, because...
Like Army of Dead.
Well, I didn't see that with her.
No, I'm sorry you saw it. Okay, go on. I'll stop interrupting.
But I had to watch this alone, and partially alone. So my significant other was within eyeshot and eventually saw what I was watching, and it led to me trying to explain it gracefully.
Oh, yeah, you're looking like a real bad husband.
No. I think I explained it. First of all, I think I'm pretty good at speaking. Not this podcast notwithstanding. Second of all, I think people expect for me to take a certain unique perspective to things. Like, I could imagine I remember when I was in the dorms and
well, before you get into this story, I am going to let you finish the story, don't worry. Just let's get this out the way, right? Did you find this movie...
Oh.
Go ahead, lead us in.
Kip, Kihipe, did you find this movie enjoyable, somewhat unenjoyable, or unenjoyable?
I found this film somewhat enjoyable.
Somewhat enjoyable. I'm glad that you found it somewhat enjoyable.
But there's a lot behind that we'll elaborate on.
Yes. I would have to say if I was, if my back was to the wall and I was on a firing squad or something, I'd have to say somewhat enjoyable as well. But that's because...
You were going to share a story.
I was just going to... It was a small anecdote.
Let's hear it.
One of my prouder moments, almost all of my proud moments in life, have to do with when someone judges me differently than what they would judge anybody else with. So I remember being in a room, one of my friends' rooms, a girl's room. There was a whole bunch of people there. And the conversation, suddenly somebody learned something about somebody else. And so they were like, we need to talk about this. But all the guys have to leave the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't make me leave the room. And I felt like, because they understood I wasn't like all the other guys, kind of.
Yeah.
So whenever I'm in a hard to explain situation, like, watching porn for you in front of my wife, I feel like...
That was an odd sentence.
I was watching it for you so that we could connect on what we thought about it.
You chose this film. I didn't choose this film. Don't try to put this on me.
I watched it for us. I did it for us.
You did it for you.
So I didn't know it was gonna be porn. I mean, in all fairness, porn is in the title.
You really just tried to pin this on me. You chose this film
because I consider it you're the boss of the podcast. You're the progenitor. You're the genesis. You're the reason why we're here.
I'm the Raj Al Ghul to your Clayman, or was it Clayface? That makes no sense.
Clayface
anyway,
doesn't have anything to do with Ra's al Ghul.
Fucking watch Batman.
I would be Damian Wayne to your Ra's al Ghul.
I don't like that kid.
Or maybe I'd be Batman, actually. Yeah, because you recruited me in. You wanted me to take over, right? The spotlight.
Oh, am I Superman? Is that what you're saying?
No, you're Ra's al Ghul still. I'm Batman.
Oh, the Raj, did he do that?
Yes, well, that was Ra's al Ghul's thing, is he wanted someone to,
I
his
thought it was going to
legacy
be
could.
his successor, Talia, his daughter. Wasn't she supposed to be?
Well, I think when Talia was created, she was created as just a love interest. We're off topic, and it was your fault.
This is true, but you're once again blaming me. But at least now it is my fault.
Thank you. So Talia was created as a love interest for Batman, and in a time when that was enough for a character. And so I don't think it was intentionally. I think it became an interesting part of Raz's character that he's kind of sexist. And so he's like, I need someone worthy of me. And his daughter's right there. But he kind of overlooks her, even though she's awesome. That became a part of his character I appreciated that got added in even subtly. But so I was watching this and I had to explain it. And I think I've cultivated a life where people expect me to have different opinions on things. So if I get caught doing something bad, I think people know that I'm not doing it for the reasons that other people are necessarily going to do it.
Yeah, they're like, oh, that's just Mad Cat Melody. He's just like that.
Exactly. So maybe I should relate to this filmmaker because some people will review this movie and say, "Hey, this guy is crazy. This guy either just made this movie because he thought he could get away with putting porn up on the screen and making, film snobs clap at it, and he just wanted to, like a person that draws a squiggly line and then tries to sell the painting for like $10 million just to see if people are dumb enough to buy it." Some people would say this is him, but I think there's a possibility that there are people weird enough, people like me, who might do a stunt like just put a porn movie in the front of my movie, but have different reasons for doing so than your average person would have. And I really feel like, because halfway through this movie, there's 3 parts to the movie. The second middle part is a collage of images and videos that most of which seem unrelated to the plot at all.
Mm.
And it's a loaded
Yeah.
And that was kind of the hardest for me to watch because A, it's so long.
It makes up the bulk of the runtime.
Yeah, it felt like they just wanted to make the movie like a feature-length film, but they didn't have a feature-length plot. So they just added whatever like shower thought YouTube videos they've collected over the years and shoved it in. Now, some of them I want to say are connected to the plot because they're sex adjacent, but even the ones that are sexually charged don't seem necessary to tell this story. So the middle section with the collage of videos is the hardest selling point for me if I'm going to tell other people, hey, you should watch this movie. Because the scene in the beginning with just amateur porn, I can argue for people like why that's there and why it adds to the movie. But the middle section, I am more at a loss.
What made you choose this film?
So one thing that always intrigues me is a bombastic, different title, right?
Okay.
I'd seen good reviews, so I felt like, well, it's going to be interesting. Also, and this is probably the number one reason, I wanted to watch it and talk about it with somebody, but I didn't think I'd be able to get anybody else to watch it with me.
So for Kip's dumbass.
Because I can rely on you.
Oh, no, you cannot. You cannot. I'm at least being straightforward. I don't want to piss you off later on in life, but no, you cannot. What would make you say that most of the stuff in the middle part didn't relate to the film in its entirety?
So, not tightly, because it seems like very broad stuff. And I can imagine the filmmaker has a lot to say. He's probably got a lot of stuff in his head that he wants to get out. But I think to be more concise with your message, because a lot of that stuff you could have branched off into other movies. Like some people write books and they only write books about a very specific, like some people only write detective novels.
Shout out to Nancy Drew.
Actors only write movies where the main character dies. You can fill a niche and spread that out among a career of films. There's so many ideas in here that he could have put into a short or put into just a PSA or a TED Talk or whatever, done it somewhere else where you don't have to distract from the narrative. Now I am familiar with you being interested in time being more. I think you could appreciate a filmmaker that stretches time and squashes time more than I can. More and more, I'm interested in movies where, and I don't want to say they're more simple, like, because I was always into, let's say...
I want to be clear, there's nothing wrong with like a simple ass movie.
No, this could have been a lot simpler. It feels like it's trying to be very sophisticated.
I think this film had basic issues.
It definitely did, and I don't understand why. Like, out of the gate, I appreciated, oh wow, we're seeing something. To me, even though it was porn, I was like, this is cinema, because it's saying something to me. Something is happening. There's levels to what I'm watching.
That's what you thought as soon as it came on. That's interesting. No, I'm not even mocking you.
That's what I thought, because I knew I had a sense for what the movie was going to be about. I knew it was about a leaked porn video, right? A
Okay.
sex tape.
Oh, so you knew that before you started.
Right, I knew that, so it helped.
Oh, okay.
And I think a lot of times, like, I like going into movies where I have no idea what's going on. But a lot of times, people know, like, people went to the theater because, like, you're not going to go to Top Gun and be like, oh, I wonder what they're going to be doing in this movie, right?
I feel like trailers are more revealing today.
Trailers are not only more revealing, but also they have to, if the bigger the budgets get, the more they want to make sure you're going to the right thing. Because if you're going to the movie for a specific thing and you're wrong, that's going to color your criticisms. And a lot of people are going to be pissed off. You know, people are going to be like, oh, I thought there was going to be a dog in this movie, and there was no dog. 0 stars. You know, like, you want people to know what they're here for.
Those people shouldn't be reviewing.
No, they shouldn't, you're right, but they are the masses, right? People that want a very specific experience. So here's the point. The last thing I was saying was, I felt like he has good ideas and points about morality. And something I can appreciate is that sometimes somebody artistic, they want to put out something shocking, right? And they want to see, oh, it's not my responsibility how people react to it. I'm just here to get a reaction out of people. And this movie, I feel very strongly that the director doesn't just want to get a reaction. The director wants to get a very specific reaction. He wants you to feel something. He wants you to feel like Viva la Revolution. And I want more of that energy in filmmakers, but I feel like he let the energy get away from him and the movie suffers for it.
So I didn't go in knowing what this film was about.
I'm glad. That would have been an interesting experience too. Tell me what that's like.
So I didn't have any expectations, you know?
Mm-hmm. And so when it started as porn, what was going through your head?
Nothing really. I was just watching. And then after a bit of time had passed, I was like, what's the point of this?
See, and I was thinking, because there's scenes in the sex, right? In the sex. That are
More scenes in sex.
At first it starts out and it's racy, but it doesn't start out with full-blown nudity. So I'm like, oh, this is uncomfortable. I can understand why someone would be uncomfortable if their, private stuff is out there. And then it gets more and more kinky. And so I'm imagining her having to explain this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, ooh, this is like, oh, everybody does that. But now she's doing this. And I'm like, oh, that's harder to explain, that you're kinky in that way. And like, oh, don't do that. Because I'm imagining people watching it and criticizing her form and like what the motivations of each action is. And like, someone reviewing your sexual acts is not something most people are prepared for. So thinking about that, the future of her having to explain herself, made watching the porn so much more interesting than just, oh, naked people,
I always find it interesting when you say I was thinking, and then you go into a bunch of different scenarios.
Why is that interesting?
Because I feel like it's usually what makes you enjoy a film that you otherwise would not have enjoyed.
Oh, it's all in my head, is what you're saying. But so why do you think they put that porn right front and center in the beginning of the movie?
I think it was there to challenge the viewer on what you find acceptable versus not acceptable. That's it. It's there just to be like, if you don't like this, say it. If you do like this, say it. Okay, we're going to show you a series of slides on hypocrisy and what is acceptable in society and what isn't, and racism and yada yada, and the history of Romania. This film takes place in Romania. They're all the actors, as far as I know. The majority of them are Romanian. At least the director, the lead actress, and the head mistress is. At the end of the film, it's like, now I'm going to make a case for why you are a hypocrite if you found this unacceptable.
Okay. Yeah, that could have gone over my head. Trying to put you in the perspective of the people watching it rather than her.
Yeah.
The main character. Okay. I was looking through the wrong lens then.
You can see her perspective after the adult film goes off, and then you get her walking around. It's easier for the viewer to be like, why are they treating her like this? But at no point as a viewer are you like, why am I like this? And then by the end of the movie, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, I kind of was like this when that movie first started.
When you say you were kind of like this when the movie started, what were you like? What do you mean?
I've always said about nudity in film, I have no problem if it's there as long as it feels necessary, as long as there's a reason for it. There was a reason for it in this film, but I think the length of it was unnecessary. When you take this portion of the film and then you apply it to the whole and think about it cohesively, I think the length of that adult film section went from making a point to just relying on shock value. So I actually think he hurt his own point by just being obnoxious with it, because you see the adult film at the end, they have everyone watch it again.
Yeah, but it's kind of off.
But you know everything that's there. I get it that the other characters are experiencing it, but if you're going to do that as a director, then I think you could have mitigated how long you had it on in the get-go. The intro felt extremely extremely long. It's very long.
It is interesting that you mentioned how they watched it all again. So arguably, someone that's trying to give notes on pacing might say, "Oh, if there's two scenes like this, just have one." And obviously, the one at the end of the movie is more important than the one at the beginning of the movie.
The one that's crucial is the one at the end. The one in the
Right.
beginning is a precursor, but you made it not a precursor by the length that you had.
Well, because at the end, and maybe I should give the context to the ending scene. So this teacher who had, through a series of unfortunate events, this tape leaked, her personal sex tape with her husband leaked, has to explain to
The school board and parents.
why it's there and why they should keep her on as a teacher and why they shouldn't fire her. So at the beginning of the hearings, in very informal outside COVID hearings, one parent, kind of stereotypical Karen stuck-up parent, comes out and says, "Oh, well, since we're going to be talking about it, why don't we watch it so that we all know what we're talking about?" And she has her iPad or whatever it was, tablet, ready to go, turns it on, and stands in that way that people stand when they're getting off on being sadistic and just basking in the glow of somebody else's embarrassment. But they think it's professional and they think they have the moral high ground, so they don't have to hide their sadism.
At no point do I think that she felt like her actions were professional. I think she just felt like, yeah, motherfucker, I have the upper hand.
Right. And so part of what makes that scene so powerful to me was, because some of the villains in the movie, the parents that are like berating her, are so cartoonish in their evilness that it was like, it makes you angry. It's like watching a cartoon where there's a villain and you just slash him in half with your sword already. That kind of thing. But one of the things that made it so powerful for me, and maybe I was watching it wrong, I could see that, is that I was remembering how long and uncomfortable it was when I was watching it in the beginning. And now I'm reliving, like I'm thinking about, all those things that she did. But instead of watching it, I'm watching the faces and the body language of all these men that are kind of ogling it and pretending that they're watching it for educational purposes, but really they're watching it because they're getting off on it.
It's funny that you say you found it interesting viewing their faces. I found this to be one of the points to argue that this director has a spark. I haven't seen any of his other filmography. Emmy is the teacher that had her personal sex tape leaked. She's showing Emmy's video to the rest of the school board, and there's always a point where Emmy is sitting in the background at a desk and everybody is across from her, and you're getting like the difference in power dynamics and how she is this really intelligent, strong woman, but in this scene she just feels like this little mouse that's pushed into a corner.
Yeah, she has no power.
And when the camera is on her face, and obviously she has the mask on, and you're seeing her eyes, you can see how humiliating it is, just put on display like an early 1900s circus freak show, if you will.
She's purposely, the woman that's doing it knows what she's doing.
She's a butthead, for sure.
Well, she's doing it not only to get a rise out of all these people and being like, "Oh, this is shocking," but she's also doing it to make Emmy feel like a mouse and make her shut up. Like, look how weak you are. Look how much power we have now. You are nothing, right? She's doing it to show it's a power play. That's one of those scenes, and I've noticed that there are less and less in movies that I can call like new, like, well, innovative is not the right word, but cinema, where I can see a movie and I can even enjoy a movie where I see the formula. I can see like, oh, this is where we're going to have an action scene. This is going to be the kissing scene. This is going to be, where I can see where things are going and I can critique and I can applaud how well they did this scene that I've seen 1,000 times. This escape scene or this heist scene. I'm like, oh, I've seen so many heists. That's so amazing that they did it this way, or they included this element of it, or they, shortened it. This sex scene is so quick, or vice versa. But this scene where, everybody's watching the pad and you're watching her face was a scene where I wasn't thinking about what was going to come after, what came before, other movies that have done this same thing. I was thinking about her and her emotions and me and what I would do in that situation and being there with her. And so there's not a lot of scenes in movies. There's less and less, I feel like, scenes in movies that put me in emotional space where I'm not thinking about the movie, I'm thinking about the emotional experience.
Do you think that you might find it harder to, because it's one thing to have empathy for a character, but it's another thing to connect with that character in an empathetic manner and what they're going through? Do you think you struggle with the latter? Because I'm thinking about all the Pragma Pods we did and everything, and I recall many times you were like, well, yeah, it's sad, but, whatever. And I'm like,
Yeah, it's sad. Anyway, I don't think I have problems empathizing, but I don't know.
Not a problem empathizing, it's a problem connecting with that character through your empathy. Like anybody could be like, yes, this is sad, and then move on. But if it's not something where you're like sitting with it and you're really like thinking about it and thinking about how it mirrors to whatever you're going on or whatever other people are going through in life, like that's the difference
See, I
between, you
was
know what I
in
mean?
that moment, but in general, like I can be in a moment in a movie and then later go have ice cream and be fine, right?
Yeah.
Except, and I've told you this before, except for rape scenes, it's easy for me to get into the emotion of the scene and get out quickly. So I feel like I can connect with the characters. I feel like I can disconnect. This scene with the iPad and the teacher, it felt like a rape scene. It felt like she was being sexually assaulted to me. You know, it felt like watching one of those scenes, and I wasn't prepared for that kind of feeling.
Yeah, they callously discarded her humanity, right? And that's one of the worst things that you can do. And that kind of mirrors how they treat the gypsies throughout the film and throughout the history. And it's just something that's just accepted. There's even like a little gaff where the guy says something about gypsies. And they're like, hey, man. And then, because it's like the one black guy that's there, he's like, I didn't mean it like that. He's like, yeah, no offense taken. And then he goes back to like joining in on ragging on her. They pretty much spoke of her as if she was this, like, for lack of better terms, when people back then would be like, you're a whore and you're a sinner. That was
Yeah,
kind of how they treated her. That was how
right.
they treated her. Mirroring that and them dehumanizing her and everybody being pissed at her. And she's just like, why is society like this? You know, the middle section of the film that's incredibly long that we spoke about briefly, they go into that and how many of these horrible war acts and stuff were, you know, there's a scene where it's like they're in, I believe, Africa, and there's some indigenous people, and the soldiers are posing next to them, smiling,
Right.
and they're like, they're good for nothing, but they are good for reproducing. Just dehumanizing somebody and how it was just like accepted, and then they go back to scenes in modern day Romania and how gypsies are treated and how it's just accepted. It makes this point repeatedly for a long period of time. So I think that's one of the problems with the center. Like we said, it's a three-part section. It's literally 3 parts. The length of the personal home video in the beginning could have been cut. The middle could have been cut.
Yes.
The ending is great. Not the ending itself, but the ending part is great. The themes that the film explores are very serious, but the nature of the film is very like free form and easygoing. And you can definitely see that in the ending.
The ending seemed like it does try to fancy itself a comedy, right?
From the music choice to the editing, yeah.
Especially that second part is the part that seemed like it was really trying to be a real comedy as opposed to just like a dark black comedy. But the ending still seemed to come out of nowhere to me.
Well, most of this film got cut. There was actually a longer runtime. And then what was released, they had to cut maybe like 10 or 20 minutes. I did read that the full thing was released to streaming services. I think that's what they said. So, but to be honest, I'm not sure if we got the full thing or.
Right. Well, you saw the Wonder Woman with the dildo scene, right?
Yes, for some context, one of the multiple choice endings of the film is that she gets fired and she. I don't want to narrate this. She pulls out the dildo and she starts attacking people with it, and she dons like this superhero costume. Yes, I promise this is the same film. She dons like the superhero costume and screams in a rage and starts attacking the school board and the parents, a giant dildo. And if you are religious, I'm going to say that this may be offensive for you, so stop listening now. One of the people there is a priest, and the credits are rolling, and you can't see what's happening anymore. You know she just was attacking people with the dildos, and you know that chaos has ensued, but you can't see what's going on anymore. You just see the credits, and you hear the music with the sound effects of her attacking the audience layered upon it. And you just hear this noise that sounds really brutal and painful, but you're not sure what it is.
See, and that's weird that you would say that because I remember seeing her actually attack the.
I feel like they didn't immediately show it. Like, they show her attacking the people, but they didn't show what she was doing to the priest.
No, I saw what she was doing.
Okay, maybe I just wasn't paying attention.
Well, maybe you saw the abridged version, but I remember because I remember thinking how weird the special effects were. Because when she shoves the dildo into people's mouths, they have like this CG effect where the mouth gets bigger, right? Because it's such a violent motion. I guess they didn't actually of the dildo because it's such a big dildo, and, right? So they had these CG mouths, and the mouths are way too big and stretchy, right?
Uh-huh.
But one of the things that got me was that when the priest was talking,
Sorry.
what?
I'm just laughing at the scene. I'm sorry.
You did you see her shove the stuff in the mouth?
I didn't sit down and watch this film in one day, okay? Normally, I try to do that. With this film, I stopped after.
After the porn scene, you had to go.
No. I stopped it was in the first section, but it was like a lot of her walking around and
Yeah, I wanted to ask you what you thought about that too, but
well, it has slice of life elements, but one of the things about it is that it's not like an expensive production.
Mhm.
So I'm watching it and I'm like, it's nice to see Romania because I don't know a lot about Bucharest, but this is like in 480p, you know?
it's nice to see Romania.
So I'm just like, oh, okay. And a lot of it honestly just reminded me of Michigan, like Detroit specifically.
Mhm.
When I started this film, I immediately started after watching one of our other films. So I stopped, and then I want to say like a day later or a day after, I continued and I finished it. I did pause the middle part one time. I think
Oh,
something that's interesting is that the middle is so long. It's
yeah.
like when you sign up for college, and then the first day is just a whole bunch of motherfuckers talking about shit that's really not that important. In the film, I think that section is all important. I just think how it's presented is bad. This film is interesting because it really is mixed media. I don't consider this fully a film, or at least like it's like a multi-genre. It switches from like adult comedy to drama to I guess the daily doldrums of life to educational. It's a very PowerPoint slide type of presentation to the.
You wouldn't call it propaganda?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could make a case for that. Yeah, sure, why not? When I think propaganda, I think this is probably just me, right? But when I think propaganda,
I don't think it is.
I think that the nature behind propaganda is purposefully misleading to ignite some type of bond for whatever cause you're trying to spur into action. So yeah, you could consider some of it propaganda, but it's so much information in various forms, but it kind of just says the same thing a lot. Watching this film, I was thinking this should not have been a film. This should have been a novel. And I still feel that way. I feel like this would be much more enjoyable as a novel.
Well, I appreciate it's the film because I wouldn't have seen it as a novel.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, before I ask you about the walking scene, do you remember what the priest said, his opinions? Because he seemed more reasonable than a lot of the people.
I did a week ago.
Oh. Because I expected, because, they pan over to this priest, and I
Mhm.
expected he was going to be one of the big, you're a sinner voices.
The mysticism of reason, yeah.
Right. And he was very much like, hey, nobody's perfect. This was a mistake. I don't see anything wrong here. And they're like, oh, you're a priest. Shouldn't you, be judging people? And he's like, no, priests don't do that. God does that, right?
hmm
He didn't say gods. um and so I was like, oh wow, that's interesting. And then at the end, when she's shoving the dildo into everybody, violently she shoves the priest over like the longest, is what it seemed like.
It kind of bummed me out that you said you saw it immediately. I could be misremembering this because I am running on fumes at this point, but
I could be misremembering. People misremember stuff.
if it's a memory issue, more than likely I'm the culprit, right?
Oh, that's so sweet.
That's awkward.
Because
yeah. Moving along. So I remember her attacking, and going into the superhero form. This giant dildo. It
Yeah.
turned into a Japanese production really fast. And I heard the noises and I was like, what is that? And the credits are rolling
You
and
knew what that was.
this jolly music is playing. I thought this was genius, keeping in mind that yes, this is going to offend some people.
That helps the comedy.
Yeah, it is offensive, right? But I didn't find it offensive. But I can definitely agree with somebody that does find it offensive. She's mouth effing this priest.
Yeah.
And he's like, ah. Well, she has like that mascara and outfit on this giant dildo. And you could see in her face the whole time she's very reserved in a very drive my car type of way. She has so many feelings towards things, but on the surface she just subdues them repeatedly. In the end was like the cathartic release of her just attacking everybody.
It was for a cathartic release, but I felt like it wasn't one of the things I appreciated about her was that she was so professional, right?
Yeah.
So when she gets into like the fight, I was so disappointed. So I wasn't exactly rooting for her to be violent, even though I wanted violent things to happen.
It was a multiple choice ending though.
Right, and I don't so I appreciated that in Clue, I guess, because Clue was it's like a game, there's multiple possibilities. But with a story, like you said, you thought it would be better as a book, right?
Yeah, I stand by that.
And as a book, I don't know how you see it as a book, but I think as a book, it would be more focused. The narrative would be telling you certain things and you'd be able to follow it. It'd be more straight instead of going off on all these different directions. I would have appreciated more tight story to it rather than, oh, we can just do whatever we want. It's like an experimental film. And as experimental films go, I can appreciate that they did different things to it. But I also like if it was less experimental, it would be easier for me to watch again. Now, I could watch it again. I wouldn't mind watching it again with someone who hasn't seen it.
Mhm.
But it's hard to recommend it to anybody because people can shut off, the porn scene, people can shut off in the middle.
Yeah.
People can shut off, when she's
I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I don't recommend anything, but I will say wholeheartedly that
but this especially you wouldn't recommend.
yeah, no, I wouldn't. No, because it's at moments I can watch it because I have a lot of patience when it comes to films. I say that now, but I just like turned off Malignant after like 30 minutes. I was like, I'm done here.
Well, you do have patience. Well, I would say you have patience because you're likely to watch films that are longer, 5 hours longer, for
Look at you
instance.
struggling to properly say what you really want to say. That's you at the end when she has that cathartic release and attacks everybody. That's you when you're trying to
No,
avoid
that's
saying boring
the
slice
inner
of life.
me that I'm always keeping inside. And
Yeah,
that's
that's
an
what I'm saying.
important part of my journey to just keep it inside and not show anybody. So also if you look on the Wikipedia, the plot synopsis on Wikipedia,
Mhm.
it tells the ending as transforms into a superhero resembling Wonder Woman. She traps the parents and teachers within a net and forces those who had most harshly opposed her during the conference to fillet a dildo. And I felt like that does the priest so dirty because he is not one of the ones that most harshly opposed her. I feel like he should have his own trial. He was
Yeah, she got it the worst, man.
yeah.
Maybe it's because he separating him as an individual, but what he represents for
But
her.
that's not
Because they spoke about the Romanian church and all the wrongdoings that they did and the hypocrisy of the
right, but
Romanian
he
church.
didn't do them.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that he did, but I'm saying like what he represented. If you represent something, whether you're a
Yeah,
nice person or not, you're gonna fall for it because
right.
you
She's
chose to represent.
attacking the collar.
Yeah, you're gonna have to take the L.
You're right.
And I want to be clear. I have some friends that try to write off Wikipedia.
It's not perfect, I know that.
Wikipedia is a great source of information, but just keep in mind that anybody can edit Wikipedia.
Right.
Most of the time, if you cross-reference what you looked on Wikipedia to other sources of academic info, there is some overlap. So there is plenty in Wikipedia that is accurate. I don't want to write
I
off
just felt
Wikipedia.
like that was the intention, and I was wrong, I guess, because you're probably right. She was attacking the representation.
I don't even think that part's meant to be taken seriously at all, though.
I mean, you're meant to laugh, right?
Yeah, that's the primary goal.
And when you laugh about something, there's a reason you're laughing,
So
right?
it's funny.
Right, but when something's funny, it's because of a reason, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so when I was watching it, I felt like, and some people laugh purely out of catharsis because they've been holding their breath the whole movie. Maybe that's what he was hoping. I felt like maybe that was the point. Was you're supposed to laugh at this priest because he's a priest, and I felt bad for that. So yes, that's what it said in Wikipedia, but I'm reading off of Wikipedia. But also, I felt bad for him even before I read the synopsis on Wikipedia because I felt like that's what they were trying to say.
Okay. It's always interesting what you feel bad for versus what you don't want.
No. I felt bad for a lot of things in this movie, but the reason I felt bad for the priest is because because anybody seeing this movie would feel bad for the teacher. It's a natural human instinct, right?
I don't think anybody would, but go on.
You don't think anybody would feel bad for the teacher?
No, I think some of these cartoony characters, I'm not saying anybody. You said anybody would feel bad. I don't think
I think most
in
people.
that
When I
sense.
say anybody, I mean most human beings watching the
Okay,
movie.
so I thought you were pretty much saying like everyone. But even most people, I'm not so sure. If we're talking about the world, there are a lot of people that, regardless of who you are as a person, is irrelevant to the things that you did. I just had a conversation about this actually. I think there are a lot of people that might have that lens where your actions, no matter how brief they are, they will define you for the rest of your life.
It wasn't her actions that caused this. She didn't put the video online.
It's relevant to most of the body that's deciding whether she should stay or go. It's irrelevant. She's pleading the case that she didn't do it. She's like, it got leaked. I tried to delete it, but it was on the internet, so it just kept getting re-downloaded and redistributed. That's what she was pleading throughout most of the hearing, right?
Mhm.
But none of that mattered.
Not to them because they're thinking about their prestigious school.
Not even that. Like what she did, a lot of them are very religious in a
Prudish.
certain type of manner. So
Right.
they're like, you committed an act of sin. They were even criticizing her sex acts. Like, who does this? This is not the mark of a dignified woman.
Right. which felt very, maybe I'm out of touch, but it felt very odd to hear someone. I had to assume maybe they were being disingenuous because it's hard for me to imagine large groups of people saying, like, you're just slutty because you gave a blowjob to your husband. So I just felt bad for the priest, is all I wanted to say. So now the walking scenes in the beginning. So it starts out strong, fast with porn, and then maybe pacing wise, that was not great. And then there's a whole bunch of scenes of her just living her life in the streets. There's another layer to all her interactions because it's like, has this guy seen the video? Is that why he's talking to me? Like, get away from me.
Yeah.
Right. And that was interesting, but also, like, to me, that was long. You know, everything in the movie I felt like could have been, except for the last scene. I wouldn't have cut the last scene, except for that Wonder Woman scene.
The issue is that everything was done right, but the way that it was wrapped up was bad. It would do something right once the scenario was created to examine. What would follow up wouldn't be in service to what was just established.
Right. It was just, okay, anyway, we're going to do this now.
It took me a while to decide whether I wanted to put enjoyable or unenjoyable or somewhat in the latter for this film. What I was trying to say in the beginning was like, if I was someone that did recommend films, I would never recommend this one.
Yeah.
It sounds like such a hateful statement, and I don't hate this movie, but this is an insufferable film.
Yeah.
But overall, there are aspects that are enjoyable, and I think it passes, but it passes in a way that the other part of me is like, this shouldn't have passed.
Well, here's why I said somewhat, maybe disingenuously, somewhat enjoyable. The reason why I would want to rate this favorably for me personally is because I'm glad I saw it. Because it made me feel things that I wouldn't have felt otherwise. It made me think things I wouldn't have thought otherwise. And it made me have conversations that I wouldn't have had otherwise. It's going to color my experiences and my projections, specifically that last scene, which I had the most fun with. I was thinking strategically, like, so she goes in and she's thinking, well, I have information because I'm a teacher. She has knowledge about history and politics, and she has her professionalism. She can sit there, she can, take the battering, right? She has her virtues, she has her wisdom. And she thinks she's going to go in and that's going to save her. But I was thinking strategically, if you go into something like that, like a trial, you have a lawyer because you can't just be right. Like, you can't just not have murdered the guy and so be like, oh, I don't need a lawyer. I'm just going to go to court and tell them I didn't
I'm
murder
gonna
the guy.
represent myself, aka
Right.
I'm going to jail.
Right. So that's what she did. She was like, I'm right, I'm innocent, so I'm going to represent myself.
Before she went there, do you think that she was thinking, I have everything I need and I'm going to prove to them? Because what I felt was, in her mind, she was like, I have intellect and I have the ability to reason and think critically with an open mind, and these people don't. And I am going to go in and I'm a great source of information, but I'm going to get sent to the wolves. Because at no point did her face look
hopeful.
Yeah, to me, it just looked like someone that's like, I'm gonna fight the good fight, but it's definitely not in my favor.
I can't say whether, because I assumed she was hopeful, maybe just because I go into situations with hope. But I looked down on that hope. I was like, you shouldn't go into this situation with hope. You should go in with guns loaded, right? She should have had strategies that they would respond to. Like, if you're talking about, oh, if you fire me, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to have a voice on the news. I'm going to say why. I'm going to make this political. This would be worse for you. It would be a worse mark, because that's what they were. Well, that's what I was thinking that they were thinking about. They didn't want this black spot on the history of their school. I got the impression it was a very, like, an expensive type school.
It was.
Yeah, so most people get into those schools because they think that's going to be a ticket to knowing the right people.
Right, but I feel that not everybody there was angry for the same reasons.
Well, not everybody.
I feel like what you're repeating is more so centralized to the main antagonist in that scene.
Right, but if you could have swayed the main antagonists, they were swaying everybody else. Right? It's kind of like a jury. There are powerful voices in a jury and there are weaker voices. And if you can sway the powerful voices, they'll sway the weaker voices. Right? That's all I'm saying. If she was thinking tactically rather than, like, just to be a good person, like, you're not going to win a court case because you're a good person, is what I'm saying. And so that was frustrating to me. And I liked the practice of thinking, what would I say? What would change their minds? I liked that game, that puzzle. So that made me think.
Do you think that if she had thought tactically, then her chances would have been improved?
Yes. See, I know you're pessimistic, which is why I was saying I thought she was hopeful, and you said you thought she.
Well, here's the thing: is that like my pessimism comes out a lot more than optimism, but I think that's more of a result of reality.
Well, that's what pessimists always say.
I feel like optimism is more so steeped in hope. I'm going to be correct when I say this. Ideally, if you're pessimistic, it's taken from experiences, not just your own, but others as well. And it is factored into your decision. I don't have anything wrong with optimism because I have went in situations where I'm like, I'm optimistic this will work in my favor. But that optimism has never came from, this is what I hope. It has always come from, this is the facts that are in front of me. So I have a reason to be optimistic. Does that make sense?
Yes.
She has done most of the things that she could do, and she has talked to the people and reached out to the people that she could. But their decision is already made. This is kind of a waste of time for her to go in. I think she should. If she has something to say, then she should say it, and she did. But I do feel like it's heavily not in her favor. So I don't think that any tactics that she would have came up with, yes, there were some voices that were not as sure, but for the most part, the decision was already made. The odds were not in her favor, and even if she would have had some well thought out tactics for battle, I still think that eventually the end result would occur.
There are situations that your chance of success are higher or lower, right? Before you go in, regardless of how powerful you are, right?
Correct.
What I see a lot of the time is one where I know the truth about something that other people don't want to see because it's a negative truth. So they tell you, oh, no, it'll be fine. No, it's fine. I've been in that situation. I generally want to see the truth of things, regardless of what I want to see, because I think it's weak to just see what you want to see. I mean, it sounds like fun, but I've decided not to be one of those people. So I see myself, even though some people would see me as an optimistic, I see myself as someone who wants to see the truth and looks for it and is not afraid to find the truth. But I do know that it can help you to go in with a positive attitude, right?
For sure, I agree. Yes.
In those situations, even when you know what's going to happen, it's not as if, it seems to me, it's helpful to have a negative attitude. So when I'm thinking about, doing your hardest, strategizing, preparing, doing things, sometimes you don't want to waste that energy on something where you think it's going to be bad. But it doesn't, to me, maybe this is a singular thing, even if I'm not going to get like a lawyer for my case, even if I'm not going to assemble a research packet of things that should help me, bringing a positive attitude isn't going to hurt generally.
Okay. When it comes to corporate stuff, there's a lot of time wasting, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
When I experience that over long periods of time and you speak up against it, you start to get annoyed with the time wasting. So all you want to do is just be straight to the point and make the decision. And I feel like with this, they're having like in the beginning of the hearing, this like, makeshift hearing. It's a lot of theatrics. Oh, watch this video. Oh, you're a whore. You should be ashamed of yourself. It's like, okay, mate, I already know how you feel about me. Let me say what I want to say, because what you have to say isn't really adding to any. You've called me a whore like 8 times. I think it's all about how you say it. They said what they wanted to say, and it was in a way that, regardless of how you feel about it, at least it was straightforward and it wasn't any pejorative terms. But then it became a attack. Like rather than staying focused and addressing the issue, it just became attack on her humanity. So that's when the pejorative terms came out, like, oh, you're horrid, you should be ashamed, da 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 da. And it continued. And from my perspective, and if I was in that moment, this is after hearing what they have to say about me repeatedly. There's a point where I would say, hey, I'm gonna talk now. I've heard everything that you have to say. I understand that you don't think highly of my personal home video. I understand that you're incredibly frustrated that your children had to watch this. I understand that it's frustrating that I now have brought a stigma to this esteemed school. I get all of that. So stop repeating yourselves. Let me say what I have to say. I won't repeat myself. And then let's go to a vote. And obviously it's not, because it's a film, right? So I'm not speaking in terms of film, but I'm saying if this was a real world thing, it's so much like fluff and unnecessary extra when it comes to those things. Just plead your case in a neat way and let's get to the point. We don't need to be here for 2 or 3 hours. This doesn't need to be a 2 or 3 or 4 hour meeting or deliberation. Am I making sense?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. But if you look at like court cases, the longer it takes, the more likely you're going to have like an unpredicted ending,
Right, but that's sanctioned court cases, right?
To me, there's more possibilities where there's less regulation. Like this here. This was a lot of emotions, right?
Mhm.
More emotions than there were laws, rules, regulations. I have conversations like that all the time
Mhm.
where I know someone is just thinking their own way. They don't really want to hear my opinion. They just want to talk at me. And what I've noticed, I've seen it happen, and I've seen people expect it to happen to me, and it didn't happen to me, and I kind of felt bad. But I've seen it happen to other people where I craft my words, lead them into saying what they really want to say because they're saying all this other stuff. If I lead them in and they finally get fed up with dancing around and they come out with an outburst of emotional words really loudly, really clearly, so I'm not talking over them so that everybody can hear, whether I'm around other people or not. Then it's almost like they say it to themselves and they realize that they are more extreme than they originally thought. So suddenly they might become taken aback or disgusted by their own views. And that's when you can change things.
Yeah. You remind me of this director in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I was trying to say that about how I can appreciate what this director's brain is like, but also I can see flaws because people have told me I have those flaws. And you were saying, hey, it could have been 10 minutes. And I understand what you were saying when you said, hey, it could have been 10 minutes, because you were saying if everybody was being honest,
But I
right?
wasn't. I want to say I wasn't speaking in perspective of this should have been 10 minutes in the
No,
film.
I know what you were saying. You were
Okay.
saying if everybody spoke plainly and simply, less emotion, less, misinformation towards themselves, lying to themselves, lying to,
Yeah. Is it necessary? Is it going to move forward the issue? If it's not,
excuse
shut
me.
up.
If it's not.
Okay, that's it. Adios.
Ciao.